if I have to go up there and get my fucking bus because this idiot doesn't know how to handle anything or deal with it, when a mechanic is explained to him, I swear to God, we'll be leaving and he will not be on the bus. Like, he'll be watching the bus leave dripping water. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about one of our drivers. We're going to name him Driver A for privacy purposes. Driver A works really good because his first name starts with A, so it's perfect. What we're going to talk about is his lack of, oh boy, how do I even say it? I don't want to say common sense because I think common sense is really overrated and almost nobody in this generation has any common sense anymore. Just basically his ability to be a professional commercial driver, and it's quite an interesting story that ended with a $37,000 bill because he blew up one of my buses, literally. So Driver A has worked for me for probably about a month and a half. And very professional, looks good, smells good, creates a pretty warm atmosphere with the customers, but dumber than a box of fucking rocks when it comes to the mechanical side of any kind of a vehicle movement that requires him doing more than pressing a gas pedal and the occasional brake pedal, which he complains about that as well. But he took a trip up into Yosemite, and we sent him in a specific bus that has a really strong retarder, that has the ability to be able to slow down with good engine brakes. So the morning of his departure out of the yard... How are you? I like that sweater.
Express.
Did I like Express? That is the ugliest sweater I've ever seen. I went over in great detail the different functions of the engine and checking the oil and where to check the oil, and drivers are supposed to do what's called a pre-trip, which is taught to you before you get your commercial license, which is basic visuals of checking your tires, doing your air brake test, air pressure test, checking your oil, checking your fluids, checking to see if there's anything leaking from around the bus, and you record it on a piece of paper that basically, you know, you check your turn signals, your hazards, your reverse lights, your backup lights, everything. Reverse, backup, same thing. But you check all that, and then you sign off on it saying that the vehicle is satisfactory to drive. When we pre-tripped it that day that he was leaving, we noticed that it was low on a couple gallons of water. Actually, it was more like 10 gallons of water. And we filled it up, and he started driving. Like 6 hours into the trip, he's coming into Sacramento, and his bus shuts off because the stop engine light comes on, which stop engine basically means you're either low on water or you're low on oil pressure. So he checked the water and noticed that it was low again, which would indicate that we have a leak either from a hose or the water pump, or it's leaking into the engine, which thank God it doesn't matter now because he blew up the fucking engine. So might as well have leaked in the engine for all I care. But generally when water leaks into the engine, it will create a brown residue. So his stop engine light comes on, he calls me and explains that his bus turned off. Fucking idiot. What fucking idiot. Like, oh my God. If I didn't have to actually think that I might actually have to drive to Fresno, if he can't handle it, I would have a fucking huge glass of wine right now, because I just have this feeling he's not going to be able to handle it. I just have a feeling. Or he's going to get like down to Bakersfield and it's going to turn off again and he's not going to know what to do. And he's just going to sit there like a thumb up his ass, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I said, okay, well, you know, check your water and check your oil and all that good stuff. And so he checks the water and he calls me back and he says, there's no water. Okay, we'll fill it up with water. And so he fills it up with water, drives up into the mountain, gets to where he's going, which is like a Christian camp. So anyways, he basically gets up into the mountain, and then he says that the oil is leaking out of the engine. So I send a mechanic up into Yosemite, cost me $1,800, and he goes up and he assesses, you know, the situation and says that, you know, I guess there's a small leak from the water pump, and that the oil is coming from around the dipstick. common sense is it's going to push oil out. So whatever, not a big deal. Detroit's leak oil, and, just check the oil and put oil in it. So the whole entire experience, even the mechanic had a frustrating time with him because the mechanic said, okay, I'm going to be at the camp in front of the bus at 2:30. So the mechanic gets there like at 2:40, and no driver A to be found. He's just out wandering around in the wilderness. If I have to go up there and get my fucking bus because this idiot doesn't know how to handle anything or deal with it, when a mechanic has explained to him, I swear to God, we'll be leaving and he will not be on the bus. And so an hour goes by that the mechanic is sitting there, of course, billing me. And finally, driver A, shows his face and explains what's going on. And so the mechanic does his work and checks everything and makes sure that it's roadworthy, which it was roadworthy. And we fast forward 2 days later when they're coming out of the mountain, and the stop engine light comes back on. And the driver says, well, there's water in it. And I said, okay, so what was your oil pressure at? He said, oh, but the temperature is really hot and it smells like it overheated. And I said, so then you're out of water. And he goes, no, there's water in it. What do you mean, like? He's like, oh, I can't put oil in it because the oil fill is hot. I'm like, what do you mean it's hot? He's like, yeah, I can't touch it. It's too hot. I'm like, if the engine was that hot where the oil plug that you got to turn to put it, if it's that fucking hot, that bus would be on fire right now. Like, it is not, like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, well, James, I know this, and I'm not a mechanic. I've done this for 16 years, going on 17. I've learned a lot of shit about buses. Let me tell you. That's why I told him, I just stopped him. I said, you're not making any sense because there's nothing that would be hot for you to touch to have to put the oil in unless you don't know. I go, do you even know where the oil goes? Like, and this is where the crazy thing comes in, honestly, James, is when we hire them, they go through a simplex training, they go through a log training, they go through a roadside training, they go through an inspection training. I mean, it's like, I don't know if he's just having like an off fucking weekend or if his baby's due in a couple of days. I don't know if he's just stressed. I don't know what it is. There's something going on, but let me tell you, like, I just cannot wait for him to get here to fire him. So long story short is basically the dumb fuck never even checked the oil and seized up my engine in front of a rundown motel that the client was saying all of the kids were saying it was like a haunted little rundown. No, I'm sorry. Actually, the client said it was, what did he say it was? It was and you're saying the hotel is abandoned? Oh. And then in the conversation, it went from abandoned to a quaint little rustic hotel where the front desk lady was making microwave popcorn for all of the camp kids while the rescue buses reached them. You're sitting here telling me like you're in front of and you literally just changed this whole story. We're in front of a rundown motel, and these kids are telling their parents, and I'm just like, so it's a rundown hotel. I was like, well, no, it's just a little quaint hotel. I mean, it couldn't be a better situation. I mean, she's feeding us popcorn and everything. Okay. Well, someone was feeding me popcorn right now.
Right.
No. I don't know, people just amaze me. And so, in transition, driver A is now sitting in front of the abandoned hotel, and I was able to rent him a room at the said abandoned hotel, and I had to have the vehicle towed. And so the vehicle was towed into Fresno to one of the mechanics that could fix it. And all the kids went on another bus and got home. And so the next morning, driver A wakes up and, like, how am I getting home? And so he goes with the tow truck with the bus, and the tow truck drops him off down in Fresno to get on Greyhound. And we Greyhound him back to San Bernardino. And basically, I just can't even deal with him, because it's just mind-blowing to me that you don't check the oil, but yet you tell the mechanic it's leaking oil. I mean, think about that for a second. You say the bus is leaking oil, and so you don't check the oil. Well, if it's leaking oil, common sense would be that it's going to be low on oil, right? No. So let's just drive it until the engine completely seizes up and costs Shaun $37,000 to get a new one put in, which is currently still getting put in. So then, in their contracts, they basically sign saying that they're responsible for any kind of damage that is because of neglect. So his negligence, which is funny, because I asked him before he left the mountains, I said, make sure and watch your oil pressure. If it falls below 40, pull over. I ask him when he calls and it says, oh, the engine won't turn on. It sounds like it's dead. And I said, okay. So what was your oil pressure at? And he's like, oh, it was normal. And so what's normal? He's like, I don't know, 20 or 30. I mean, it was normal. Normal oil pressure is 50 and above, but whatever. Can you buy him a brain too? I mean, is that possible? Do we know where we can find one of those? I don't know. Yeah, no, me neither. I'd go bankrupt. So these buses have what's called an ECM unit, which is a mechanical brain that is attached to the side of the engine that records everything, kind of like a black box on an airplane for when they crash. But this just records the last 10 minutes of what the engine was doing in case there's a malfunction. And so in the last 10 minutes of him driving, the PSI of the oil was below 10, which basically means there was no fucking oil in the engine. And he ran it that way, which means he wasn't paying attention to his gauges. So they printed out this 3-page report that they emailed to me that explained all the different functions of the engine and what was happening and the gradual increase in the temperature in the engine and the combustible chambers and the diesel injectors were pushing out fuel and everything's working. The only thing that's the problem is that the oil pressure is below 10, which it doesn't even record past 10. It just records 10 or lower. And so basically he was the one that blew up the engine. And what's frustrating about it is that the mechanic and myself both told him to put oil in the engine before he left, and he said he did. Well, come to find out, the reason the oil was coming out, the driver that was trained to put tire chains on his vehicle let the clients put the tire chains on. So the tire chains basically go on the dualies, and they go on the outer dually, which is the drive axle. And if they fly off directly under the engine. So the right side flew off, went up under the bus, and cracked the oil pan. And so he drove with all the oil pushing out of the bottom of the engine. So not only did he not put the chains on, he let the clients put the chains on. Not only did he not check the oil, but then he drove with the oil pressure below 10, and here we are with a $37,000 bill for a new engine. So the point of the story is, driver's an idiot. Driver did neglect the vehicle and did not follow protocol of installing the chains himself, even though he was trained. And that cost him not only his job, but his last paycheck, because he signs for it, basically saying that if there's any kind of negligence that creates a indirect bill for the vehicle, or parking tickets, or if you sideswipe a curb or you hit a car, they're responsible for it. So he's responsible. And that's the story of driver A, who was a brief blimp on my radar of ignorant, dumbass people that I've employed. Well, that concludes my story of driver A. We'll get into driver B, C, D, L, and E all later. And make sure you do comment. I want to see the comments and read them and be able to see how would you have handled the situation if you had an employee that cost you close to $40,000 in a matter of minutes. And how would you handle the situation about them, I guess, just being ignorant? I mean, I don't know. California law requires you to do so much with employees, and you can do so many things, and then there's so many things you can't do, which is a shame. Anyways, make sure you like and subscribe. Subscribe by hitting here or here or here or wherever the fuck the videographer wants to put the little damn button. And look forward to new videos. We have lots of giveaways coming up, lots of different contests for things. We're incorporating my business and trips going to Vegas and all kinds of fun stuff for people to win and get the experience of a lifetime.